Hey everyone, hope you're doing well and welcome to today's video. We're in the studio and we're going to be doing another black and white landscape photography critique. Today, 3 images have been sent in from Dale Sutherland-Roberts. He's a photographer from up in the north of England in Yorkshire, so naturally he's sent in beautiful, foggy woodland imagery. So we're going to be talking about how Dale works in projects, as well as how shooting in different conditions can evoke atmosphere, emotions, and feeling in images. So let's go ahead, jump right in. I've got the images ready in Lightroom and Photoshop. So these are the 3 images that Dale sent in, and it's abundantly clear that Dale likes to make work in projects. So I believe these are from 3 separate projects, although taking a cursory look at them all next to each other, I think you could almost argue that they would work together in a single project. The consistency of making images in these sorts of foggy conditions, as well as a great sense of depth that's achieved through using a very centrally located vanishing point, throughout all 3 of the images, really lends itself to create depth, which we'll talk a little bit more in depth about when I go into each of the images individually. But to start things off, I wanted to quickly read a short excerpt from Dale's website where he discusses one of the projects, which this first image is from. I'm not sure if the other 3 are from this and didn't quite make the cut, or if they are from upcoming bodies of work. But this is what Dale has to say about this image and the project that this image is part of. These photographs were made during the permitted 1-hour walk of 2020 during lockdown, and initially Dale was struck by the overwhelming stillness, the roads and skies devoid of traffic, the local playgrounds empty, and everyone just seemingly holed up within the comfort and safety of their own homes. So the walk guided him along an old disused railway line and through a Roman fort near his house. And he began to explore the metaphorical connections between his daily walk, that of the species, global migration, and connections between his situation and the photographs that he was making. And the sequencing of his book sort of goes from this slightly disconcerting, silent loneliness or longing to something a little bit more upbeat. And this is actually the final image I'll switch over to Photoshop quick. So this is the final image from the walk. And although it starts off in this almost somber, melancholy, lonely, longing search, as you flick through the project, it gets a little bit more levity, and you can see when Dale starts to reach a turning point where the walk actually becomes something therapeutic rather than a reflection of, the hard times that were affecting everyone during lockdown. And I think the fact that this is 2 people rather than 1 really drives that home. And the fact that it's the last image, it's about people coming together and everyone going through the same emotions as a collective species. So it's a really powerful concept, and it's beautifully shared through the medium of photography here by Dale. And I'll talk a little bit about the composition more in depth as well, and how it effectively creates depth. So one of the things is obviously the fog diminishes detail in the background, and that relative difference between all of the detail of these overhanging branches set against the fog and that slowly diminishing set of trees aids that sense of depth. So along with that, and you've also got these sort of vanishing points, and yeah, it ends up being an exceedingly strong image. Dale's made a creative choice here to keep the tones of the image quite muted. So if I just have a look at the histogram here, you can see it's all very much to the left, and there's a huge space where, you know, you could, in theory, brighten that up, but actually, if I just turn this on and off, I think you'll probably agree that the darker mood is more in keeping with the project and the feelings that Dale was working through when he was going on these walks. Let me jump in here really quick and just ask, if you're enjoying the video, please do like, subscribe, and leave a comment below. It really helps to support the channel. Thanks very much. Let's get right back to the video. This is Dale's second image, and it's a fantastic composition that's very, very carefully considered. And for me, he's resolved a lot of the issues that would normally happen in woodland exceptionally well. Again, he's using that central focal point to draw the viewer in, and that's paired with the beautiful foggy conditions again. But the one way that Dale really effectively creates depth is by almost separating the composition into two halves in a way. This lower portion is sort of that dark, moody, where all of those details that would be distracting are almost just crushed into one tonality, and then set against that bright fog, we then start to see all of the complexity, and all of these branches wonderfully sort of point the viewer back in to the middle. So there's all these beautiful shapes here. There are, of course, a few things that are slightly distracting, but that's just you know, the case where you've got to accept some of these imperfections, I think, sometimes. This branch here isn't ideal. I don't really see an effective way of excluding that. You know, moving one way or the other would change this composition too much. So I think this is a great opportunity for Dale to potentially explore using some of these sliders. You can also do the same in Photoshop and mask the sliders off if you only want it to affect certain areas. We can see as we change the yellows here, it is affecting this tree, and potentially Dale doesn't want that to happen. He might just want to bring out, you know, some of these aspen leaves, I believe, down here. So that would be something that I would play with personally. And of course, there's a lot of blue in the image, so using the blue there, although darkening down the fog, I probably don't want to do that. But I think some of those leaves could certainly be brought out in the foreground and add just a little bit more interest and complexity there. Just because it is such an image of two halves, that bringing a slight bit of tension between, you know, the complexity here and the foreground is probably a good idea. And then the only other small thing that I would personally do would be a negative vignette. So this is just raising the highlights. I've done a blend if with a light blend if and a very soft feathered mask there. I don't have time in this video to explain that, but basically just lifting this portion of the reflection up a bit. Not brighter than the sky though, because that would look unnatural. But overall, I think this is a really good image and a great example of dealing with very complex landscapes, but creating something that's relatively simple and is really all about that emotive response. Moving on to the last image, I'm not sure if this was originally part of the walk because, well, I've actually been on a walk with Dale, and I think we followed essentially the path that he took for the project, although without this beautiful fog. And I don't know if this is one that didn't quite make the zine that he produced. But yeah, it's definitely an interesting photograph about the sort of juxtaposition of nature and man-made objects. You've got all of this sort of greenery here that's essentially looks like it's overtaking some built forms, and the same again on the left. And then that sort of juxtaposition of the trees poking through the mist versus power lines poking through the mist. One of the great things that Dale's done here in this image is leave heaps of space from the horizon line up to the top. So I think everyone's heard space is atmosphere, and that really comes through here. This one for me though has a very different mood and feeling. For me it's very eerie and mysterious versus the sort of longing or loneliness that I felt in the previous two. And I think it is that juxtaposition between man-made objects and nature in a photograph. You almost expect a sort of lone figure to be stood here. Overall for me though, this one is sort of, it's slightly missing something. I don't know what it is though. You know, these foggy or quiet contemplative images don't necessarily need wow factor. But for me, you know, the interesting part is potentially this tree right here, and I think your eye is sort of being drawn away from it in a way. And there's something a little bit strange going on here in the sky where the sun's coming through the fog that is slightly distracting. You know, having something so bright right on the edge of the frame isn't necessarily the best thing. There's also some sort of specular highlights reflecting off of this tin roof that is slightly distracting. But yeah, I mean, it's a nice image, but I just don't think it is quite as strong as the other two. I'd be interested to just have a quick look at the raw file for this. So yeah, I mean, you can see the fog's sort of just starting to burn off. So Dale's had to the black and white definitely does slightly enhance that, but there's a lot more detail in this raw file than Dale has left in the final edit. So yeah, for me, this is one that I would either process differently or potentially look to exclude from the larger body of work, because these other two are, this one in particular, I really like. The longer, it's one of those images where you sit and look at it and it sort of evolves and you get a bit lost into it, and then you want to look in the details, and then you step back and take another look from further away and just look at the overall form of the shapes in the sky up here in really crazy patterns that are formed almost spider web like. But overall I think certainly two very strong images, and one that's I think the concept is there, but it's just something about that particular scene that is slightly off for me. But yeah, that's just one man's opinion, and all of these critiques are meant as just a starting point for discussion. And I think Dale's work really, it does speak for itself. And I like that Dale works in his local area. So, and you know, when you do that, you are forced to work with everything around you, all subject matter and elements. So he's really honed in on what makes this particular area around him special. So that's something that I highly commend. And yeah, I think that's going to wrap it up for this one. Thanks again, Dale, for sending these in. It's been a lot of fun looking at them and having a little discussion. And if anyone wants to get involved, then please do check out the description box below, and there'll be some details where you can contact me for how to do that. Thanks everyone, and we will see you in the next one. Cheers.